I had been looking forward to my trip to the lake for months. Work had been overwhelming, and I needed a break from the constant stress of everyday life. The thought of spending a few days by the tranquil water, fishing, and simply unwinding seemed like a dream come true. I packed up my car and set off in the late afternoon, aiming to reach the lake by nightfall. The drive was long, but I found solace in watching the scenery change as I left the city behind. The setting sun painted the sky with breathtaking shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows over the winding road. As night fell, the road grew more secluded, surrounded by dense, towering forests that seemed to close in around me. My GPS indicated that I was still about an hour away from my destination. I was starting to feel the fatigue of the long drive when something unusual caught my attention. Up ahead, the road seemed to be shrouded in an unnatural darkness. I slowed down, squinting to see through the inky blackness, and that's when I heard it. A faint voice calling my name. At first I thought it was my imagination playing tricks on me, the result of fatigue and the eerie isolation of the woods. But then I heard it again, louder and more insistent. My heart began to race, and a chill ran down my spine. I glanced around, but there was no one in sight. The voice seemed to be coming from deep within the forest, hidden among the shadows. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. How could anyone out here possibly know my name? I quickly got back into my car and locked the doors, my hands trembling. I didn't want to stick around to figure out what was going on. I started the engine and pulled back onto the road, accelerating away from the unsettling darkness. But as I drove, the voice continued to echo in my mind, repeating my name over and over. I cranked up the volume on the radio, trying to drown out the sound, but no matter how loud the music blared, I could still hear it, clear as day. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white. The road seemed to stretch endlessly before me, and the trees on either side felt like they were closing in. The darkness outside seemed almost alive, as if it were watching me, waiting for the right moment to make its move. My mind was racing, filled with terrifying thoughts of what could be out there, lurking in the shadows, following me, calling my name. Then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared, standing directly in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, causing the car to skid and screech to a halt. The figure remained motionless. It was tall and shadowy, its features obscured by the darkness. Yet, I could feel its eyes on me, cold and unblinking. I was paralyzed with fear, my body refusing to move. The figure began to slowly walk toward the car, its movements unnaturally smooth, almost as if it were gliding across the ground. Panic surged through me as I fumbled with the gear shift, desperately trying to put the car in reverse. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely manage it. The figure drew closer, and as it did, I could make out its face. It was ghastly pale and contorted, with hollow eyes that seemed to bore right into my soul. I finally managed to shift into reverse and slammed my foot on the gas pedal. The car shot backward, and I didn't stop until I reached the lake. Breathless and terrified, I parked near the water's edge. The moon cast an eerie glow over the still surface, reflecting the stars above. I stepped out of the car, my legs weak and unsteady, and looked around frantically. There was no sign of the figure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. Too frightened to set up camp, I spent the night in the car, my eyes darting around at every sound. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of fear through me. I kept expecting the figure to reappear, those hollow eyes staring at me from the shadows. But the night passed without incident. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, a wave of relief washed over me. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension slowly leave my body. The haunting voice and the figure in the road felt like a distant nightmare, something that had happened in another world. But I knew I would never forget the terror of that night, nor the feeling that, somewhere out there, something was still watching me. I had been eagerly anticipating my trip for weeks. I was driving to visit my childhood friend Alex, who had recently moved to a remote cabin in the woods. The drive was long, but I welcomed the solitude and the opportunity to clear my mind. As I left the city, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the winding road. For the first few hours, the drive was uneventful. I listened to my favorite podcast, enjoying the relaxing rhythm of the tires against the pavement. But when I turned onto a narrow, forested highway, I noticed a car trailing behind me. It was an old, beaten-up sedan, its headlights cutting sharply through the encroaching darkness. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, this was the only road that led to Alex's cabin. But as the miles stretched on, the sedan remained at a consistent distance behind me, never attempting to pass or slow down. A sense of unease began to creep in. I changed lanes, but the car followed suit. I slowed down, hoping it would overtake me, but it matched my speed instead. When I accelerated, it sped up right along with me. My heartbeat quickened. The road became more desolate, flanked by dense, towering trees that seemed to close in on either side. The glow from my headlights barely penetrated the thickening darkness. I glanced in my rearview mirror. Those glaring headlights were still there. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles white. I tried to call Alex, but my phone showed no signal. A wave of panic started to build inside me. I didn't want to stop, but I also had no idea what else to do. I kept driving, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, silently praying to reach Alex's cabin soon. Then, I saw a fork in the road and instinctively took the left turn, hoping to lose the car behind me. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope as I saw the sedan hesitate. But then, it turned and continued to follow me. My stomach sank. There was no mistaking it. They were definitely following me. Up ahead, I spotted a small, rundown gas station, its neon sign flickering sporadically in the darkness. Desperate, I pulled into the station, hoping the presence of others might deter whoever was trailing me. I parked as close to the entrance as possible and hurried inside, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, the gas station was nearly deserted, save for a tired-looking clerk who barely acknowledged my presence. I quickly explained my situation, but he just shrugged, uninterested. I glanced nervously out the window and saw the sedan parked at the far end of the lot, its driver still inside, watching me. I felt trapped, unsure of my next move. I couldn't stay there forever, but I was too afraid to leave and head to Alex's cabin. With no other options, I decided to confront the driver. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and stepped outside, walking cautiously toward the sedan. The driver's window rolled down slowly, revealing a man with a blank, expressionless face. I tried to ask him why he was following me, but he said nothing. He just stared at me with cold, unblinking eyes, as if studying me. A chill ran down my spine. I turned and quickly hurried back to my car, locking the doors as soon as I got inside. I didn't know what else to do but drive. I pulled out of the gas station and back onto the dark, lonely road. The sedan followed. The road grew narrower, the forest closing in even tighter. My headlights picked up a faint shape in the distance, Alex's cabin. Relief flooded through me, and I pressed down on the accelerator, racing toward the safety of my friend's home. I pulled into the driveway, jumped out of my car, and frantically banged on the door. Alex opened it, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. I turned to point at the sedan, but it was gone. The road behind me was empty, as if it had vanished into thin air. My heart pounded as I tried to explain what had happened, but my words sounded crazy even to me. Alex pulled me inside, and we quickly locked the doors. I spent the night peering out the window, half expecting to see those headlights reappear, but the car never came back. The next morning, we searched the road and surrounding area, but there was no trace of the sedan. It was as if it had never existed. My younger brother, Sam, and I were driving to visit our grandparents, who lived in a small, quiet town far from the hustle and bustle of the city. The journey was long, mostly along deserted highways that wound through stretches of dense forests and open fields. As we drove, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky turned a deep shade of blue. Sam had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, his head resting against the window, his breathing steady. I kept my focus on the road, the hum of the engine the only sound breaking the silence. About an hour into the drive, I noticed a pair of headlights appear in the rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was just another car on the road. But soon, the headlights grew closer, the light becoming more intense. I expected the car to pass us, but it stayed directly behind, riding our bumper in a way that felt far too close for comfort. An uneasy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. I tried to ignore it, thinking the driver would eventually overtake us. But they remained, following closely, their lights glaring into the car. The car behind us began to swerve erratically, moving dangerously close to our rear bumper. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, trying to keep calm and maintain control. I decided to speed up, hoping to put some distance between us and this reckless driver. But to my growing concern, the car accelerated as well, matching our speed. My heart pounded in my chest as the reality set in. Whoever was behind us had no intention of letting us go. The highway around us was dark and desolate, with only the shadows of trees lining the road. We were alone, miles from any town or help. Suddenly, the car behind us pulled up beside us, their high beams cutting through the darkness, illuminating our faces. Without warning, they swerved sharply towards us, trying to force us off the road. I yanked the steering wheel to the right, narrowly avoiding a collision. The sudden movement jolted Sam awake. He looked at me, his eyes wide with fear, but I couldn't explain. I had to concentrate on keeping us on the road and away from danger. The car continued its relentless pursuit, swerving back and forth as if trying to force us into the ditch. Up ahead, I saw a sharp curve in the road and knew I had to use it to our advantage. I gripped the steering wheel even tighter, my eyes flicking between the road ahead and the car beside us. As we neared the curve, the other car made another aggressive attempt to ram us. I waited for the last possible second before swerving sharply to the right. The maneuver caused the car to miss us by mere inches. The driver lost control, and I watched with a mix of horror and relief as their car veered off the road, crashing through the trees and disappearing into the darkness with a loud crunch. I slowed down, my hands trembling, my heart racing. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but there was no sign of the car or its driver. The highway was empty once more, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. I pulled over to the side of the road, my breathing heavy, trying to steady my nerves. Sam was visibly shaken, his face pale. We sat there for a few moments, both of us too terrified to move or speak. The thought of going back to check on the car crossed my mind, but the idea of confronting whoever had been behind the wheel filled me with dread. I decided against it. The safest choice was to continue on to our grandparents' house without looking back. We resumed our journey, the road ahead seeming darker than before. The drive that night felt like it lasted forever, but when we finally saw the familiar outline of our grandparents' house, a sense of relief washed over us. Even though we made it safely, the memory of that harrowing chase stayed with us. I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, out there in the dark, danger still lurked, waiting for another unsuspecting traveler. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed our stories and would like to hear more, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you captivating tales and new content every week. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate every one of you for being a part of our storytelling journey.